Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's Cabinet meeting of Lewes District Council, and welcome to everybody who's joining us on our live stream and might be watching this later on as a recording. You're very welcome. It's great to see members of the public with us always, and great to see so many all the councillors with us today, and welcome to officers too. I'm Councillor James McCleary. I'm the leader of the council and I'm the cabinet member with responsibility for regeneration and prosperity. I'm going to ask my colleague councillors to introduce themselves and state their particular roles. Can I ask colleagues, when introducing yourselves, could I ask you to please confirm whether you have an interest to declare in any item on the agenda, and I'll go through a roll call one by one so that you can introduce yourselves. So can I start with Councillor Bird, please?
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Matthew Bird. I'm the Sustainability Portfolio Holder for Sustainability, and I have no interest to declare on any items.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Julie Carr, Cabinet Member for Recycling Waste and Open Spaces, and I have no interest to declare on the meeting this afternoon. Thank you.
Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Chris Collier. I'm the lead member for People and Performance, and I have no interest to declare on any item on the agenda today. Thank you.
Councillor Denny.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Johnny Denny. I'm the lead councillor for Communities and Customers. I have nothing to declare in terms of interest for this afternoon's agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Meyer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Chair. Sorry, my microphone was off. I'm William Meyer, Councillor William Meyer. I'm the portfolio holder for housing. Regarding this agenda, I have a personal and prejudicial interest to declare on item 11 regarding my my appointment as director of AHLLP Executive Committee. So I will not be taking part in the second part of the discussions.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor O'Brien.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Emily O'Brien, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, and I've got no interest to declare.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. And Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you very much. I'm Councillor O'Keefe and I have the Tourism and Devolution portfolio, and I do have an interest to declare in item 18, voluntary sector support, because I am a trustee of the Citizens Advice Bureau, and I have ascertained from the legal advisors that this is personal but non-prejudicial. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. And just to say that Councillor Nicholson has informed us that she will be joining us today, but she's going to be a bit late joining the meeting. So I will be rearranging the agenda because Councillor Nicholson has a number of items relating to finance on here. And that I'll just be rearranging the agenda accordingly to give her some time to join us. And when she joins, she'll introduce herself and declare any interests that she may have. Just to say, for the benefit of everybody, that the way in which the meeting proceeds on each item is important just to lay it out for everyone who's present, just before I move on to asking opposition members to introduce themselves. We will proceed, as we do at every meeting, by the item being introduced by the relevant cabinet member, and then any officer input that we need at that point. We'll follow that with the specific recommendation, if any, that has come from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, and we'll just be needing at that point that specific recommendation and the rationale for that recommendation. I'll then invite the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Linnington, to add any comments she has before we have a debate amongst cabinet members and then move to a decision after the cabinet member has summed up. I just thought I'd lay it out for everybody so people know how these proceed, just because there are some people who haven't attended a cabinet meeting before. It's important that we proceed in that manner. So having mentioned them, can I invite members of the opposition who are with us today, starting with Councillor Linnington. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. I'm Councillor Isabel Linnington and I'm the leader of the Conservative group at the Council. I have no interest to declare today. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Peterson, Chair of Audit, and I have no interest to declare. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Berman.
Councillor Roy Berman. I'm a substitute representative of the chair of the PPAC committee, and I have no items of interest to declare.
Thank you, Councillor Berman, and welcome to the meeting. I know you haven't attended one before, so great to see you. Okay, so let's proceed forward. As I said, I'll need to rejig the agenda a little bit until Councillor Nicholson's able to join us. Can I just ask that everyone mutes their microphones when they're not speaking? And if you have any connectivity issues while we're going, could you keep your video on at all times if you can, because it's good for the stream, for obviously members of the public to be able to see councillors. But if you do have problems with your connectivity, please feel free to turn your camera off, because that will likely improve the situation. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand using Teams, using the hand icon, and I'll call you to speak in turn. It's particularly important in this virtual format. To get started on the agenda, just bear with me one moment while I just rejig what I'm looking at. Okay, the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of December 2020. Can I take it? Does anybody have any issues they'd like to raise on the agenda on those minutes? No. In that case, can I take them as agreed? Does anyone dissent from that? No, great. No, in that case, the minutes are agreed. Apologies. I have no apologies except for Councillor Nicholson, who, as I say, will be aiming to attend the meeting later on. Are there any apologies from anybody else? I don't think so. I think we have a full set of people here today. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Simon Russell, Head of Democratic Services. Just want to formally put on record of the meeting that Councillors Joe Miller and Liz Borman sent their apologies, which is why we've got Councillor Berman representing policy performance today.
Of course I did. I knew that. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that. Declarations of interest are already been dealt with. We have no urgent items. Item 4. Item 5, we have no public questions. Item 6, we have no written questions from councillors. And item 7, we have no matters referred to Cabinet for reconsideration by Cabinet. So in that case, I'll move to item 8, which is ward issues raised by councillors at full council. Councillor O'Brien, can I ask you to speak to this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to report that all the follow-up actions have taken place from that on this issue. So we've written to the developer in the strongest possible terms, as I should add, is something we've been doing continually over the last number of years. We have finally managed to make contact with them. It's been a bit tricky, but we're waiting for further details. They are reviewing the commencement of their works, but we will be following that up, obviously, over the following weeks. We've also written to the Secretary of State. I've personally written to the Secretary of State to ask for changes to the enforcement powers we have, because they're not adequate at the moment to allow us to enforce the progress that everybody wants to see. And I've also, just to add, I've written to our MP Maria Caulfield, who's the MP for that area, and she's very helpfully also following that up with ministers on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Are there any comments that anyone wishes to make on that particular item? No. Okay, thank you. And we just agree the report and note the action taken. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, for taking that forward for us. The Recovery and Reset Programme is item 9. I can take that item myself. It's really just to note this report. I would draw members' attention to item 2.2 on the agenda, which is about delegated authority, which the Chief Executive has to take forward some spending on online payments for members of the public who need to various money for things. That's been taken forward, but other than that, it's really just to note the report. Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to raise on this report? Councillor Denny.
I just wanted to welcome the section you just referenced. So it's Councillor Johnny Denis. The bit you just referenced, the use of digital. I think this is a really important aspiration, and I'm really pleased that it's being taken forward. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments on that report? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'm just going to skip past the finance items for the time being. We'll come back to them, which is quite a few items. Okay, so I'm going to skip forward to item 15, if that's okay with everybody. And Councillor Collier, would you mind introducing this item for us?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the portfolio progress and performance for Q3. I'll just briefly outline it and then hand over to see if there were any recommendations from PPAC, and then come back to Cabinet members for any comments on the report. Q3 covered the period where we were moved into Tier 4 during that quarter, but performance remained at a very high level. Were there any recommendations from PPAC?
Councillor Berman, were there any recommendations from PPAC relating to this item?
Thank you, Chair. We supported the recommendations in full, although we did note with some sadness there was a decline in the recycling numbers, but other than that, and we believe it's been corrected after that meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Lennington, do you have anything to add on this report?
Councillor Isabel Newington. No, thank you, Chair. I think just thanks to the officers, obviously it's been a difficult year, and it's good to see that performance on the whole has held up very well. So just to congratulate officers on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newington. I think that's a very important point, and I completely agree with you. It's been a very challenging year for the officers, and it's great to see that many of the indicators are heading in the right direction. Would any Cabinet members like to add anything on this report? Councillor Carr, and can I encourage people to use the hand icon where possible? Just makes it a bit easier for me. But Councillor Carr, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, no, I just wanted to clarify really about the recycling rates that dipped slightly. I think that the understanding is that the household's residual waste was increasing as people were decluttering and doing decorating and various things. And that increased the percentage which was non-recyclable, which had an adverse effect on the PI. So that was just a quick.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Denis.
Councillor Johnny Denis. Yeah, I would just like to comment on the customer and community and customers targets. That actually I'm really impressed again with the team about actually how well we're doing in responding to inquiries and dealing with our customers. I think they've done a sterling job given the circumstances. They're really still pulling the rabbits out of the hat on a daily basis. I'm really impressed. I just want that to be noted. And I also note that we have a markdown on item 4 in the KPI description, but actually it's a markdown to target. So I don't see that as a negative. I will just see that as this is fine. I'm really happy with the way that we're going. So this is it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put in a good word for those staff working very hard in the tourism and devolution parts, particularly tourism, which has been a really difficult place to be. They don't have much of a mention in these pages at the moment because they're not able to do very much. What they have been doing is whatever they can, and they've also been trying to make sure that whenever they can do something more, they will be ready. So I just wanted to put in a word for some very unsung heroes.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. And Councillor Meyer.
Councillor William Meyer. I can just put a word in for the officers who are working on obviously our rent collection. You would have expected, and I suppose we could expect, given the really extraordinary difficult circumstances many people are finding themselves in, that our rent performance would be way down, but actually it's very close to target. And I think that's a tribute to really how the way officers have tried to work with our tenants and the approach they've taken in these difficult times. I don't think we should underestimate just how much effort on part of our officers and how stressed our residents are, those very often least able to insulate themselves from this dreadful and worsening economic situation that we all find ourselves in. This is a good performance, and I've spoken to officers about this regularly, and I've been amazed actually that they've managed to achieve this. I can't guarantee this will continue because clearly the economic situation under this administration, and I mean the Westminster administration, clearly we are facing all kinds of headwinds now, and so well done, officers, and we'll have to keep an eye on that and see whether that can be achieved going forward, because I would hate that to start stressing the council's finances even more going forward. So I'd like to pay my own tribute to the officers who work with me for their outstanding performance, and to thank our tenants, frankly, for paying their bills, because without that, we can't sustain our social housing.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. So I've got a few hands now. Councillor Collier, are you looking to sum up, or do you want to make an additional point? Because if there's something else, I'll come back to you at the end.
I'll do it at the end.
Okay. Councillor Carr, your hands up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry, I should have actually also said when I spoke earlier that the figure for Q2 has been updated. We were waiting some more information from a third party on this, and it's now 40.65% rather than 37.69%. So while still slightly under, looks better than the figure that's in the papers before us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. And I'll just add before I return to Councillor Collier that, because there's nowhere else on the agenda I can do it, my congratulations to the regeneration team who have this week submitted our bid to the Towns Fund for £24.7 million of investment in New Haven. That comes on top of course, the incredible work they did that started under the last administration for the Future High Streets Fund, which we were granted provisionally £5 million for recently. They've been pushing forward the Railway Quay project, the new shared workspace in Lewes, and a number of other projects. They're an incredibly stretched team, but they've been delivering incredibly well. So they have my thanks and admiration. I know that's shared by everybody on the council. They've done an incredible job with meagre resources, quite frankly. So long may it continue. Not the meagre resources, the incredible work. So I'll return to Councillor Collier, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would echo everybody's thoughts about the work that our staff have put in. And I'll draw everybody's attention to number 23 in the KPIs, which is the sick absence, which for the third quarter running, we've achieved the target, which is something that has seldom been achieved up until now. And I'd like to just invite our head of HR, Helen Knight, just to talk through some of the things that the staff have been doing and some of the things that the HR department have been doing. Helen.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. So, as you've said, the absence figure has reduced dramatically, and I know that probably contradicts the fact that we're in a pandemic. We have had staff who have needed to be absent for COVID and other related reasons, but we've also done a number of other things that we've had really positive feedback on and I think have helped. You may be aware we've eased the flexi time scheme, which used to say you could work between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. We've eased that to 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. quite clearly saying staff should not be working all of those hours, but to give them flexibility, particularly those that are homeschooling, to balance all the different priorities that the pandemic is presenting them. We've done a lot of personal risk assessments with people who are struggling or who are having to self-isolate and shield. We've done a couple of surveys and text messages to people in the morning to see how they're feeling, and then we can pick up if people are struggling. We've got about 18 mental health first aiders now in the organisation, which has been really helpful over the last year. And we've put a lot of information on the hub about mental health, well-being whilst you're working from home, homeschooling, a whole range of things to really try and make things as easy as we can for those that are now having to work at home, and some in very difficult circumstances. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to take suggestions, but it has had an incredibly positive impact on the attendance figures, which means probably for the first time ever, we will meet the target this year.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. And the action here, I think, is just to note this report and the progress in it. So if there's anybody dissents from that, we will simply note report and move on. Thank you very much, Councillor Collier, and thank you, Helen, for that update. So it moves us on to item 16.
Chair, we lost you there. I lost you, certainly.
Something very exciting happened then. It was trying to dial me in or something. Anyway, I'm back. So item 16, we will get to the climate change and strategy, climate change and sustainability strategy. Councillor Bird, could I ask you to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Bird. Well, firstly, I want to say that how really pleased and proud I am to see the climate change and sustainability strategy come to Cabinet today. I feel it's a real marker, and it's required a huge amount of effort from a lot of people since we declared the climate emergency in 2019. So firstly, I just want to say thanks to all the officers who have been so proactive on this. You know, they've really understood the urgency and the ambition that we set forward as a council, and that's been required to kind of respond to these sustainability and climate challenges. Especially want to thank Kate Richardson, who's led on the strategy. I worked with Kate at the council a long time back, so I've not been surprised by her skill and her professionalism. But I just think this has been a massive challenge in developing a strategy that, you know, everyone has a vested interest in, and a lot of people have such high expectations of. So trying to meet those requirements has been a really, really laudable piece of work. And I also want to thank the climate scrutiny panel. They've been vital. It's been vital in feeding back on the strategy. You know, and they've really helped it through its development. So before I hand on to Kate, I just want to kind of mention a few things that really stand out for me in the strategy. I mean, firstly, I think there's a real strong evidence base, some sound science sort of underpinning this. You know, early on, we decided to work very closely with the nationally recognised group Anthesis, so that we could get the most comprehensive, meaningful carbon footprint, not only for the council but for the district. And in some areas, we've delved into great detail. For example, we've done a land use and agricultural study on our emissions, so that puts us on a really good footing going forward. Secondly, in terms of engagement, we've engaged with so many people in different ways in developing this strategy. So we've held sustainability expert panels on all the action areas. We facilitated a climate action forum and a youth forum, and a climate action forum website has been set up. And I think this is really illustrated in the fact that we have been a big part of the Lewes Valley Cares Partnership, which is a climate change project, which received funding from the National Lottery. Out of 650 applicants, we were one of 14, and they recognised the depth and the value of the partnerships that we have along the Lewes Valley. So that is from coast to town. And, you know, there's going to be projects like, for instance, the Barkham Community Heat Project, you know, which is groundbreaking. I think it was on the news a few days ago. And that's going to be the blueprint for villages going forward to the work that's been done along the coast with community groups there. So, you know, that's just one example of the depth of our engagement and partnerships. And I think, thirdly, you know, we really thought long and hard about what the strategy was going to look like and how it was going to engage with people. There's been too many sustainability strategies in the past that have just sat on the shelf. So the interactiveness of it, the way in which it develops going forward, is not just something that we agree today and it sits there. It will develop. So we've set out some carbon pathways. We've made a lot of use of infographics, and we want it to be a web-based interactive resource for our communities. So it will be engaging going forward. And then I suppose fourthly is the deliverable actions. There are, I think something like 90 actions in the plan, and underneath a lot of those actions are other actions. And many of those are already well underway. So, for instance, our social housing decarbonisation plan, which we're leading on at a county level through the Greater Brighton Partnership. So, many others have actually recognised our pioneering work, frankly, that's already underway. And a lot of these actions, as I said before, they're not just ones that we're doing; they're in partnership with others. So all sorts of groups and organisations around the district and nationally. I suppose finally, I just want to say before passing to Kate that in the midst of the pandemic and the tragedies that have been faced by our residents across the district, there have been some things to reflect on going forward in a climate sense. So a lot of people have enjoyed and recognised the value and importance of our local nature. Air quality has improved. There's been more opportunities for cycling, and I think most of all, there's a resilience in our communities that has really been shown through the pandemic, which is being shown by a lot of people in the face of a climate emergency. So that gives me great hope, and so I'd just like to thank everyone for all their input in this, and to pass over to Kate to explain a little bit more about the shape of the strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Kate Richardson, Strategy Lead for Sustainability. I don't really have much to add to what Matthew said. I don't want to talk for ages about this. Obviously, the strategy is there to provide a framework for all the work that we're doing, but also to highlight and exemplify all the good work that has been and is going on in the wider district. It is quite long, it is quite chunky, it signposts to more detailed reports, as Matthew says, that are already on our website. We know the website needs some work in terms of the information that we're providing and where we're pointing residents to for more information. So that, along with sort of more engaging, shorter pieces from this strategy, is something that we're going to be doing over the next few months. So be it sort of topic based or summaries of the pathways, using the infographics in different ways. So we'll be producing those comms over the coming months, and hopefully the framework the strategy is providing that framework for trying to move this work on faster than the council has been used to working to date. And I think a lot of the work that we've been doing sort of shows that we can actually move at pace when we need to, and we'll continue to do so. The next update to this will be in September. So from September, it will be annually in September, where there will be a update of all the emissions reports and of the action plan and sustainability indicators. By then, we'd hope to have a complete set of indicators as well. It's more likely that there'll be more indicators than there are currently. It's just we haven't been able to work out the detail of some of them. So hopefully that suffices, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. We'll come back to Cabinet comments on it in a moment. Councillor Berman, were there any recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee you'd like to convey? And also, can I ask Councillor Peterson and Councillor Lillington if you have anything to add after Councillor Berman's comments? Could you put your hands up, please? Thank you. Go for it, Councillor Berman.
Councillor Berman, no, at the PPAC, we supported the recommendations in full, but I know my colleagues have a couple of words they'd like to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Lillington.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Isabel Lillington. Yes, there's no doubt there's been a huge amount of work into this, and I congratulate all the work that's been done. And there's no doubt that the document is a very beautiful looking document. And it is quite easy to read, but it is incredibly long. And I just feel that you're not going to get residents' engagement with something that's so long. So I'm really pleased that Kate Richardson has just said that they will try and do some sort of summary of this and do some communications about how residents can get involved. Because I think I know it's it's a complicated issue, and there are things the council can do, and there are things the council has to work with other people to achieve. So the whole thing is not simple. It's very complicated. But I think the thing that's missing is what can residents do to help. So I think what it needs is a shorter summary of the main points of what you're trying to achieve, and how residents can help, and what individual actions they can do to help. And I think that would really then get people engaged in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennington. I'm sure that will be taken on board. So could I have hands from any members of the Cabinet who would like to speak on this item, please? Okay, let's start with Councillor O'Brien.
I just want to say very briefly just what an exciting day it is that this is here. I completely support it. I'm really excited to see the emphasis on the big ticket actions that make a real difference. And I just wanted to pay tribute really to Councillor Matthew Bird, the amazing leadership he's brought to this, and to Kate and the officer team for the amazing work they've done on it, and just say I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Denny.
Councillor Johnny Denny. Well, Councillor O'Brien must have been reading my script. I'm absolutely an amazing document that really sets out the direction for the council. It acknowledges what we've already done since declaring climate emergency and takes it forward in a really strong way. I've not, for a council to have a plan like this, it's really a remarkable thing. I'm really grateful to Councillor Bird and the team for producing this. It's really, and it gives us something to measure against on an ongoing basis. So I'm really pleased with the direction of travel. Thank you ever so much, and I look forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Denny. Councillor Nicholson, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Zoe Nicholson, apologies, and thank you, Cabinet, for your patience. Apologies for my lateness. What an amazing strategy, but also I just want to acknowledge that, of course, this isn't the beginning, or this is, we're a year into this process, and therefore all of our papers at this Cabinet really feel like they are bringing together all the thinking that's part of this sustainability strategy, and that is great testament to both Councillor Bird, but also the whole team and the entire leadership team at the council, and the way that we've worked in partnership with so many other organisations, and in particular the things that obviously that really feel like they matter to me in my portfolio, my small part of the world, is in the brilliant way in which the sustainability strategy is influencing how we're thinking about spending money in the future, the brilliant way in which the sustainability strategy is influencing how we're thinking about recovery in our community, using our capital programme to really reinvigorate the green and renewable sector in our community to create more jobs, because we're going to need it as we head for probably the worst recession in living memory. So thank you very much for all the hard work that people have done on making that possible, and we've still got a lot of hard work to go. Let's be clear about the challenge ahead of us.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Just say, Councillor Bird, I'll come back to you at the end once we've had everyone's comments, if that's okay, and then you can sum up and respond. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I mean, much the same as others have mentioned, I'm just so proud and excited to be part of a council and a cabinet that has pushed this agenda forward, and to be where we are today. And yeah, Councillor Bird's done an outstanding job, and Kate, yeah, equally so. And it's been really lovely that over the last year or so, Councillor Bird and I have worked together in a lot of areas, because our portfolios do cross over. and particularly open spaces. You know, we've been talking about planting trees and all the sorts of lovely things that we can do working together. But also, you know, more sort of gritty things like transport emissions. We're on a working group looking at, you know, how we can improve that. So I think, you know, it's an example of how we all work together. But I think this is a fantastic step forward. So well done, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. And Councillor Meyer.
Councillor William Meyer. Well, clearly, Councillor Bird and the team and senior officers have done an amazing job here. But perhaps we can get a bit of perspective on this. As my colleague Councillor Carr has just said, I'm really proud to be part of this cabinet. This is an administration that is born of collaboration and cooperation between a number of individuals and a number of parties and independents. And I think that we must remember that one of the reasons we formed this alliance was to drive through these kinds of actions. And it's a cooperative effort on all our parts, on behalf of our residents, on behalf of the county, on behalf of our country, on behalf of everyone. And you really can't understate this unless we have more of this cooperation and collaboration amongst many individuals and many parties at the highest levels. We are never going to sort this out. So in our own small way, and it's no small thing that Councillor Bird has achieved here with Kate and other officers, in our own way, we have really set a torch alight. And I think we should, all of us, yes, we can congratulate ourselves for doing this, but remember, this has happened because we had the guts to form this administration in the first place. This was an administration, remember, that was only going to last for, what, a few weeks, I think, was the carping we heard from the opposition when we formed this. And it's marvellous to hear that our colleagues are welcoming this. I'm delighted that all we heard is that we need perhaps to paraphrase perhaps some of what we put into this long report. But I think we should recognise that this is it's not the only, but it's one of the major outcomes of our achievements in the last 18 months. And well done, Matthew.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Livingston, I can see your hand up there. Is it a point of clarification?
Yes, indeed, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Isabel Livington. I just want to say I really object to that speech from Councillor Meyer. It's totally unfair to say that this only came about because of the alliance forming, because for the brief time I was leader, I made it clear that I was putting great importance on environment and sustainability, and I made it clear that I was happy to work with everybody else on this. So, but as we know, you took over, which is fine, but I think it's totally untrue to say this would not have happened with, you know, if we still had a Conservative administration, because I had made it clear that it was my priority too. So I just want to correct that, because I think it's given a very false impression.
Okay, let's not, I don't think it's useful to get into a debate about what might have happened in different situations in alternative realities. Look, Councillor Meyer, do you have anything particular?
Yeah, well, I just want to, I won't have words put in my mouth. That is not what I said. I did not say that this could not have happened under the opposition's leadership. The 2 or 3 months that Councillor Livingston led the council, I'm sure she was committed to the environment. But I was really talking about the broader sense here and trying to get a perspective on cooperation and collaboration. We are where we are, you know. Local politics is what it is, and we've formed these groups, and these are the groups that have driven this forward. And it's great that we're being supported by our colleagues in the Conservative Party. I'm delighted, but that is not what I said, and I was trying to make a broader point here. And if that is really my main point here, this comes out of an effort on the part of many individuals, and it has been driven, as we've seen, extremely quickly by some fleet of foot work on behalf of a number of very, very committed individuals. And there is no one more committed than Matthew Bird.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. So, speaking of Matthew Bird, Councillor Bird, can I return to you to sum up, please, and then we'll move on to the recommendations themselves.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I'm not sure I want to be committed, but yeah, I mean, I just want to respond to a few things. I mean, yes, I totally agree with Councillor Meyer. I mean, it has been, it's been a collective effort, not only all officers and all councillors, but the groups and the individuals and communities that we've engaged with. And in terms of, you know, ordinary people being involved, as Councillor Lillington says, I don't think, you know, my inbox is just filled with emails from people saying how they've experienced this engagement with the council, how they've got involved in planting projects. You know, at the moment through lockdown, Lewes Cemetery has carried on being planted up by the Lewes Arboretum group, you know, on a weekly basis. You know, that's something that hasn't had much attention, but you know, one of our officers has been working with this group, you know, with COVID restrictions in place to carry on planting. I mean, it's an amazing. These are the actions that we've been taking all the time. So you know, I think in terms of engagement, it's been amazing. Climate hubs. There's the Lewes Climate Hub that's been set up, which you know we've obviously given premises in Fisher Street to the Seaford Environmental Alliance that we're supporting, the Sustainability Hub in New Haven, the Railway Quays, I mean, the list goes on. On a weekly basis, there seems to be new things coming online all the time. So that's the first point. I think the second point is, you know, I've actually through my day job, been involved in quite a few climate change strategies. I've read many more than you will ever see in your lifetime. And actually, this is not a long one. It's actually quite short. It's very easy to read. As I say, a huge amount of effort went into the presentation, went into the infographics. We trialed this on a number of people. And the climate scrutiny, of which Councillor Lillington is a part of, you know, has been involved in this process all the way through. So, you know, on the web, online, it will be different. I wouldn't expect anybody to read any strategy in entirety. You go into the bits that are important, and actually, when you go into those bits, they're presented in a very clear and relevant way. So. You know, just once again, I just want to say, you know, this is, as Councillor Nicholson said, this isn't the start. You know, this is just a marker. You know, as Kate says, the sets of framework. A few weeks back, I think we were hearing about the climate change a section in our Treasury management strategy. You know, I haven't seen another council that has done that today. You know, it's really, you know, it runs as a strand throughout all our work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. And obviously I echo everybody's comments. You've done an astonishing job, as have the officers. I mean, I think that we have to hope that this is supported, particularly by government going forward. I mean, I was astonished to be reading about the coal mine that they've approved up in the northwest, up in Cumbria, which, you know, was something that even I think before climate change and the climate emergency became so high on the agenda. I mean, extracting coal out of the ground was seen as a damaging action even decades ago, let alone now. So I hope that we're going to see, there have been other areas where there's commitment. Of course, we're seeing the extension potentially of the Rampion wind array off the coast, which I think is positive news in terms of renewable energies. And let's hope that we see more commitment in that area. And of course, we're pioneering in a lot of areas, including hydrogen and others in terms of energy generation. So thank you, Councillor Bird. Thank you, all councillors. I'd like to commend the 3 recommendations that are in the report that are laid out in your packs. I'll take them as approved unless anybody dissents. If there are any dissent, could you please show your hand now? No, thank you. In that case, all 3 of those recommendations are approved. Congratulations, Councillor Bird, and congratulations to you, Kate. So in that case, I will now go sort of back in time, and because Councillor Nicholson's with us now, so we're going to go and do the finance items, which means we'll go back to item 10. Before we do that, I realise that I overlooked declaring an interest at the beginning of the agenda. I have an interest in item 11. It's a personal and prejudicial interest, the same as Councillor Meyer, as I'm on the appointed to the board of the AHLLP in my capacity as a cabinet member, and therefore I'll take no part in the element of that item that refers to that specific board, and I'll absent myself from that. So with that, I'd draw everyone's attention to item 10, and I will hand over to Councillor Nicholson to introduce item 10 for us. Oh, and Councillor Nicholson, could you do a full introduction and declare any interest you have, please?
Thank you very much, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Zoe Nicholson, I have no interest to declare in any item on the agenda except for item 11, the second recommendation, where I have a personal and prejudicial interest as being a board member of the Aspiration Homes Limited Liability Partnership in connection with my role as being a cabinet member. My apologies for my late arrival, and thank you so much for rearranging the agenda. I'm going to try not to be a broken record over all items on this agenda and try to weave a bit of a narrative on where we are financially as a council. And I suppose the first thing I'd like to say is that this item 10 relates to Q3 financial performance. And it's been a tricky year for the council, but it's equally been a very tricky year for our residents and businesses in our community. And with us being in lockdown number 3 and in, quite frankly, quite frightening rates, new case rates in our district and deaths, I just want to make sure that we don't have a conversation that's just about the finances of the council without taking into account the devastating impact that this virus and the pandemic is having on the community that we serve. So what this report does is set out for you where we are at Q3. We are where we thought we would be. Roughly, so the general fund, so that's our the money that basically runs the council. We've got a deficit of just over 800,000 at the end of Q3. I just want to remind cabinet members that that takes into account both the emergency money that the government has given us. It also takes into account the income compensation scheme, and just to be really clear that the income compensation scheme only covers less than 50% of our overall income loss that we have experienced as a council. It also reflects the fact that our additional housing costs, which we've invested in supporting those people who have been at risk of homelessness or have actually been homeless during this pandemic, that there's a gap between what the government provides us and what it costs us. And that gap in this up to this quarter is just about 400,000. So we are just about where we are and where we expect to be. And we've made some also small changes to the capital programme and the collection fund, and those are reflected in the report. That's all I had on that item for the moment, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Can I see, are there any comments from any members of the opposition on that report? It didn't go to the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, I don't think. So do you have any brief comments you want to make? Otherwise, I'll just move on to cabinet members. Okay, thank you. In that case, do any cabinet members have anything they'd like to add on this particular report? Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. I would just say very briefly that we need to recognise the work that the senior management team have done to cover the shortfall from government. There's been a lot of work put in. Councillor Nicholson mentioned the income compensation scheme and the lack of support and I just think we just ought to pay tribute to our senior management team. Thank you, Chair.
I think everyone would echo that, Councillor Collier. Thank you very much. Any further comments from Cabinet members? In that case, I'll move on to the recommendations, which is that the two recommendations as laid out in your packs, and I would recommend they'll take them as approved unless anybody wants to put their hand up in dissent from that. No. Okay. Thank you very much. In that case, those recommendations are approved. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item 11, which is the General Fund Revenue Budget and Capital Programme. Can I pass over to Councillor Nicholson to introduce the first set of recommendations on this item, please?
Thank you. Councillor Zoe Nicholson. So carrying on the theme of it's been a tricky year, what this report does is also set out, quarter three set out where we were at quarter three. What this one does is say where we expect to be by the year end of this financial year. And then it goes on to set out our proposed budget that goes to full council in end of February for 21-22. The big headline messages are that we expect to balance this financial year, and we've done that despite the fact that we will have a significant shortfall between what government said it would do, which was on the 21st of March, Robert Jenrick said that he would stand behind, do what we needed to do to get the job done in supporting our communities, and government would stand behind us. Well, clearly government has not stood behind us, because the gap between what our cost pressures were and their support is in excess of 1.4 million. We have closed the gap in part by using reserves and in part by making some savings and use of contingency. I just also want to point out that on top of 3.6 million of additional expenditure, we also supported we gave Wave Leisure, an important partner, an important player in the district, and important for the well-being of our residents, 500,000 in financial support. That's on top of the 3.6 million that we had to spend. So I'm really delighted to be able to say that we've been able to balance despite the difficulties that we face. So that's 2021. 21-22. I suppose the big story that is worth talking about is, again, I just want to remind, and perhaps Cabinet members don't know, that when the government, when Rishi Sunak set out his settlement to local government, which had quite a significant fanfare, the implications for us were less of a fanfare. So what he assumed in that settlement, that we would increase our council tax by £5 a year. And that has been factored in as part of our calculations, hence the recommendation to you today that we increase council tax by £5, which is the equivalent to 10p a week. But even by doing that, we are still left with a 1.3 million deficit. That's taking into account additional COVID-19 government support grants. And the way that we've managed to balance has been to the creativity and ingenuity of our leadership team in achieving a number of savings while still delivering high quality services. So I know that that no one round this table, including the opposition, want to put up council tax by 10p a week for our residents. However, I also know that that residents really value the excellent quality service that we currently provide and want that to continue. And I also know, because I was in a call, as were many other councillors around this table today, talk with all of our system leaders in the district, talking about the future recovery. And I know that we are concerned about the end of furlough and the end of the furlough scheme that feels like a massive cliff edge. So in response to that, I'm going to make 2 additional recommendations that I'd like to introduce now, if I may, Chair, to Cabinet that we consider and discuss. The first is that we use our Council Tax Hardship Fund scheme, so our locally designed Council Tax scheme, and any other resources that we have available to us in order to provide those residents who are of working age, who are in financial distress and who are likely to be in financial distress as the end of the furlough scheme happens, to maximise the amount of council tax reduction that we can award to equal 100% of their council tax liability. That way, what we will be doing is that we will be targeting support to those people who need it most. And as Cabinet will remember, we'd already agreed in November to move to 90%. I would now like to propose that we make the maximum discount available to them of 100%. And that we can put into action from the 1st of April, if you agree the recommendation today. The second recommendation is that I would like to request that as soon as it's practically possible, that officers bring to Cabinet a report on putting a statutory process in place for amending the council tax reduction scheme for the following financial year, which is 22-23, and which would set out the financial and any other implications to all preceptors of providing 100% discount to qualifying people of working age. So without further ado, perhaps we could talk about that, and then I can come back and talk about the capital programme, because there's some exciting things in our capital programme that will be worth talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. So at this point, I'd invite Councillor Berman to relay any specific recommendations that came from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at the committee, we wanted to support the recommendation subject to the following amendment, and that was that in item 2, that the Cabinet report be amended to read 0 increase in the council tax for Lewes District for the year 21-22. And the thinking behind that was that by making an increase, those who are barely managing but are not eligible for relief through the various schemes are actually the ones who are going to suffer most by this increase. And we felt that the increase was, although difficult, was affordable because the provisions for the business rate retention seemed to be overly pessimistic, and that there was a good expectation that it would be sufficient to cover it. But further to that, we have been continuing for the last number of years to make significant cost reductions year on year, and there is every reason to expect that with good officers we have today, that we could continue to make sufficient cost savings to meet the small amount involved in not increasing the rate this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillors Linnington or Peterson, do you have anything else to add at this point, just before I move to Cabinet members?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Isabel Linnington. Yes, just to reiterate what Councillor Berman has said, really, I think the thinking behind this is that in a year when everybody's had a difficult year, it would be nice for everyone to benefit, even if it's in a small way, because particularly the, I suppose you would call them the squeezed middle, the ones who are just always over the threshold of being able to, claim council tax relief or other benefits. There's always some that of hardworking people that are always just managing. So it would, we always have a council tax reduction scheme for those who really the poorest, if you like, in the district who really need the help. We always have something to help them, but it's the ones just above that who are struggling but just don't qualify for anything. So this was a small way that everybody could benefit. So that was the thinking behind it, and we think that it is affordable within the budget. So that's why we proposed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Linnington. Can I just remind you and everyone else to use your electronic hands when you want to come in? It's just a bit easier for me to see who wants to do things, because otherwise I'm relying on luck seeing you on the screen. So I'll open it up then to Cabinet members to discuss this item. So please put your hands up if you want to say something, and I'll start with Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnny Denis. I really welcome the idea of being able to support our most vulnerable at this time. We see increasingly, if you talk to any of the voluntary sector organisations that support our residents, they will know how many people have been hit, how many people have not been adequately supported, how many people are really at that cliff edge that Councillor Nicholson mentioned, and to be able to offer the opportunity to not pay their whole council tax, rather than suddenly having to find 20% or 10% of it, even when they don't have any money, seems like the obvious way that we can support those people who have really been struck the hardest. And while other people may be on the squeezed middle, I think Councillor suggested that they're not in that precipitous place. And it's those people that we really need to protect, that absolutely are the most. And everybody in this council area needs to have their services provided for. And if they don't have if the funding doesn't exist, but they can't have those services. We can't provide for people with a negative budget. So we have to find the money from somewhere. So if we're not supported by central government to deliver that, then of course we have to set up a council tax. And so it's a small one, but it's the smallest we can get and still deliver something. We're still having to use our reserves well and deliver capital programs in order to find the money to do so. But it's really important that we actually manage. We cannot go into a deficit like that. We cannot go worse by not having a council tax, and that way we'll be able to provide support the local economy and support the local services that are most required, and continue. Otherwise, it's a dip and it's a dive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. I would 100% support a 100% council tax reduction scheme. I think over the coming months that's going to be absolutely vital for the many thousands of people across our district who are currently in furlough, many of which are just waiting to be made unemployed as the recession begins to bite. Many of those people are already, well, all of the people on furlough, unless their employer has stepped in, have had their income cut by 20%. And so I would, absolutely welcome 100%. Council tax reduction scheme. It's actually a real genuine attempt to do something for the most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor O'Brien. Just to reiterate, as others have said, I completely hear what Councillor Linnington says, and I would love to be in a position that we could not increase council tax. However, I suppose one of the things that really struck me reading this report, and it is one of the, the most important reports we get all year when we're looking at setting our budgets, is the way that when you look at the risk assessment, which is in the Appendix 4 on page 63, it really just sets out what extraordinary times we're doing this budget in. Really, I wouldn't expect to see so many risks that are rated so high, both in terms of probability and impact, everything from continuing impact of COVID-19 to continued failure of the government to step in and give us the funding we need. And I would love to see no increase, because I totally hear what you're saying, Councillor Linton, about the squeezed middle. But as someone who's worked in the area of food poverty for the last 8 years or so now, I just know how some people are really struggling with the absolute basics. And I think the limited support that's in our gift to give, given the difficult circumstances we're doing this in, I would absolutely support targeting that very limited support at those who are the most in need. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Just all I would say on this is I think I agree with all Cabinet colleagues, and my congratulations to Councillor Nicholson and all the officers for pulling this together. It's remarkably difficult circumstances to be pulling together a balanced budget. It's worth pointing out that it's been an extremely challenging time to do that in. And I think what this budget does for us and for me is it is about fairness and making sure that we're being fair to our community, as well as everything else we need to provide. It's important to point out that we're really asking for 9 pence, 10 pence a week from a Band D taxpayer. And of course, not everyone is in Band D. There are people who are in the lower bands who will be paying less proportionately. It's not an enormous amount of money to ask for, and other authorities are in the same position where they're, of course, having to ask for additional funding from the community. I think it's also worth pointing out that council tax is not the only way to hardwire fairness into your community. The council provides services that support people on lower income. It provides services and creates opportunities in our community to allow people who have the least to get on with their lives and live their lives. And by continually cutting back on council funding, that leads to cutting back on council services eventually. And if you're cutting back on council services, that is hitting people much harder than saving them 9p a week in their council tax bill. So I think it's in many ways, quite a short-sighted way of looking at it. And I'd really congratulate Councillor Nicholson and the officers for coming up with this idea around council tax reduction, because what it does around that fairness agenda is it really targets precisely the people who are in most need of support. And the talk about the furlough scheme ending, it's important to point out that is a government decision that's been made. They're the ones who put an end date on it, not us. And we are doing what we can with, let's face it, very limited resources, increasingly limited resources, to support those most in need in our community, not just through CTRS, but also through providing more council homes, by confronting the climate emergency, which affects all of us and disproportionately affects those with least in our community, by creating opportunity, investing in regeneration. So there are a lot of different ways of supporting people who are barely getting by and who have least in our community, not just reducing council tax. And indeed, a very small amount, 9p a week for a Band D taxpayer, is a very, very small ask to maintain all of the different services that the council provides to residents in incredibly challenging circumstances, as Councillor O'Brien has pointed out. So I strongly endorse Councillor Nicholson's approach, and I'll hand back to Councillor Nicholson to sum up.
Thank you, Councillor McCleary. Thank you. It's an interesting debate and discussion. There's a couple of things I'd just like to point out. One is that, of course, in increasing our council tax by a really tiny amount, just over 9p a week, we sit alongside some of our other preceptors, East Sussex County Council, for our £5 are increasing by £53 for Band D. And of course, they're doing that because that's also part of the Chancellor of Exchequer's settlement arrangement. And I suppose one of the things I just want to make clear is that when we target our small amount of resource that we have to those people who are at greatest risk, we're also, and the way that we're doing it this time is that we'll also be supporting them to be able to pay for that increase as well. So it's not just the CTRS scheme doesn't just provide support for our share, it provides support for all the preceptors' share. So I think that's a really, it's really important that we understand that and put that into context. I just also want to point out that our capital programme for the next 3 years is also a key way in which this administration is intending to stimulate the local economy and the amount of prosperity within it. So, we have deliberately used our borrowing powers to be able to extend what we can do to build much needed council homes and target the building of those homes with local companies and local firms. We'll be spending $1 million on our leisure facilities. That also brings local jobs and local prosperity. We'll be spending over 3 years $1 million on our open spaces, on our playgrounds, again with an absolute intention to both increase the biodiversity but also to increase the ability of the people who do the work to benefit. So as Councillor McCleary points out, there are lots and lots of ways in which this council is committed to supporting its local community and making sure that we do our absolute level best to weather the storm of the economic collapse that is surely coming our way. So I hope that Oliver Dixon has got the new recommendations for you so that we can add those to the existing recommendations on page 1, and then I also need to absent myself for the discussion on stage 2 on recommendation 2.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think we can take them. I presume we can take these separately. So before myself, you and Councillor Meyer have to leave the meeting, we can presumably vote on the first set of recommendations. Jump in, Oliver, if I'm wrong about that. It's not jumping in, so I'm going to assume can.
That's fine. I assume, though, Chair, you have the full wording that was provided at the start of the meeting.
Yes, I've got that, and I think all councillors have, I hope. So I will take those as approved unless anybody dissents. The first set of recommendations in item 11. Okay, in that case, at this point, I'm going to hand the chair of the meeting over to Councillor Collier, as myself, Councillor Meyer and Councillor Nicholson need to leave for the second set of recommendations in this meeting. Simon, are you just going to kick us out and then let us back in?
Yes, Chair, I will. If you leave, I will invite you back in upon conclusion of the rest of this item.
Okay, we'll all leave now, and I'll hand over to Councillor Collier. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for James to disappear. Thank you. Okay, so we are on the second part of the recommendations, which is on page 38 of the papers, and I will invite our Chief Finance Officer, Hamira Javadi, just to take us through the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Hamira Javadi, Chief Finance Officer. Chair, I do believe actually my colleague Ian Fitzpatrick will be following this up.
Thank you, Hamira. Ian?
Hello everyone, Ian Fitzpatrick, Deputy Chief Executive. Yes, this relates to Aspiration Homes, and members will recall that Aspiration Homes is a jointly held limited liability partnership between Eastbourne Borough Council and Lewes District Council. And that was set up 2 or 3 years ago to deliver affordable homes. Under that LLP or limited liability partnership, there are restricted matters that were originally put in place to protect the interests of both parties, so both Eastbourne Council and Lewes Council. And this recommendation relates to one of those restricted matters. Effectively, it's seeking authority from you or approval as Lewes District Council to any lending that Eastbourne wishes to make to the Limited Liability Partnership to bring forward its own affordable housing programme. If we were, and at some point, we have plans, or Lewes has plans to bring forward its own housing through Aspiration Homes. At that point, Eastbourne would be being asked to do exactly the same, which is to note and approve the lending of the other party and the terms upon which that lending is made. So it's very much set up to ensure that both parties have full sight of each other's plans, and that the approval process is there to make sure that it's very clear and open, and that it protects the interests of each party that's involved. So as I say, that at this stage, it's Eastbourne seeking, subject to approval, to lend to bring forward a housing delivery programme, affordable housing delivery programme, and seeking your approval. But as I say, at a future point, it may be the other way around.
Thank you, Ian. Before I open this up to Cabinet members, I'll ask if any of the opposition members would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. It's Roy Berman here. We didn't touch on this in the PPAC meeting, but I did read it myself, and I got to say it makes eminent sense, and I can't see any reason not to go forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Were there any comments from Councillor Linnington or Peterson? No. Okay, I'll open it up to Cabinet members if they'd like to comment at all. No hands. Excellent. Then I'd like us to ask us to approve the recommendations en bloc as set out in part 2 of the recommendations. I will just take it. Is there any Cabinet member dissenting? It should indicate. No. Excellent. Then we'll take that as agreed. Thank you, Simon. You can invite the chair back.
Thank you, Councillor Collier.
Hi all. Okay, thank you, Councillor Collier, for taking us through that item. In that case, we will move on to item 12. Oh, I'm just going to check my agenda. Yep, item 12, which is the housing revenue account. Councillor Nicholson, back to you.
Thank you, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Item 12 is presenting our housing revenue account and budget setting for the coming year. This is set in the context of this administration's exciting and ambitious plan to not only build more much needed council homes, so we've committed to building 200, of which I believe, although I may need Ian to verify this, that we've already built or bought the equivalent of 40 or 50. Maybe Ian could be precise about how many we've managed so far, which is an amazing achievement, and also to improve the amenities in our housing stock and for residents, and also to work on how we decarbonise or make, in simple terms, make our homes warmer and cheaper to run. And this year every year we have so we have a 30-year plan that we presented last year, and every year we have to review the budget and set the the rents for this year over the rents on not just our social housing, but also some of our other properties. And Cabinet will notice that we have tried to keep those down to an absolute minimum as much as we possibly can. And other than that, unless there's something that Councillor Meyer would like to say, or if actually we want to bring Ian Fitzpatrick in to talk about this, then that's my introductory piece.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I'll invite Ian Fitzpatrick to comment, and then I'll just go to Councillor Berman, and if Councillor Meyer, you do want to add something, we'll come to you after that. So, Ian.
Thank you. Ian Fitzpatrick, Deputy Chief Executive. Yes, Councillor Nicholson, certainly just looking at the performance over the last year, Palmerston House in Fort Road was 13 units. That was the affordable rent and very sustainable scheme, modular construction. Saxonbury is due to complete shortly in Lewes. There's been some purchases in the Chailey and in Plumpton. So broadly speaking, we're just around about that 50 mark. So certainly your figures were about right. I would say just in addition that we obviously have worked with TOLD, the resident engagement group. I would like to say that we'll continue to look at the product of this report really and how we now spend our money. So the budgets that this report actually releases for things like repairs and maintenance, but also tenant engagement and important things like sustainability and how we adapt our housing stock, they will be subject to conversations with the TOLD group going forward over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, so Councillor Berman, could you relay any recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at the PPAC meeting, we supported the recommendations in full. There was a little discussion about the rents in connection with the garages, because there seems to be much lower take-up on them than there had been, and we wondered whether we may actually do better by looking at those rents and reducing them and actually letting more out. But other than that, we accepted the recommendations in full.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. And Councillor Peterson and Lennington, do you have anything to add at this point? Nope. Okay, thank you all. I'll throw it open to Cabinet members then. Councillor Meyer, can I start with you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we have 706 garages, Chair, so we do need, and we are looking at the utilisation of these in terms of what the potential may be. We've looked at, obviously, on numerous occasions whether there is any potential to use the sites, and we have one or two in mind, which I won't go into any detail at the moment, where we might be able to develop them as part of our social housing schemes. But overall, I think that Councillor Berman actually made a good point there, insofar as he's raised something that we're already aware of, but we'll be taking that forward down the line. Councillor Nicholson, of course, was absolutely right about the numbers, and thank you very much, Ian, for clarifying. You all know, of course, that we're working extremely hard to bring these forward as quickly as possible, which, of course, is why there's such a substantial amount of money laid out in this year's programme for expansion of our housing. And clearly, obviously, as per process, senior housing officers will bring forward each of those schemes as and when we've got some further details on them to Cabinet to be approved. And so, obviously, there'll be ample opportunity to discuss individual schemes in the next year. And I suspect, and I certainly hope, and indeed, I am committed, I don't mind being committed to housing, that I will bring forward these schemes as quickly as we possibly can. Our intention is to meet the 200 target that we set out, and actually, if at all possible, we clearly wish to exceed that. This is just the minimum. We're limited to some extent by acquisition of sites, and obviously it's not always possible to bring bring things forward as quickly as we would like. But actually, only this week we've been successful with some more rural housing, which will be further details coming up soon. And I'm very excited what we'll be able to do further in Newhaven down the line. So watch this space, and I will remain deeply committed to this cabinet and to this administration and to our residents to achieve what I said we would do and what we all said we would do when we set out on this path in July 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Does anybody have any other cabinet members like to add anything? Obviously, housing is as interesting as I think Councillor Nicholson said at the beginning, that this agenda actually reflects a lot of the priorities of our administration, and we've obviously had the climate change and sustainability strategy already, and now obviously talking about housing, which is a huge priority for us, and I know something shared by opposition members as well in terms of getting new housing available for residents as high quality and affordable as quickly as we can. Councillor Nicholson, did you want to add anything else to sum up, or before we move to the recommendations?
No, only to say that because this will go to full council, there are discussions ongoing with Told in between now and then, and we'll do our best to build the recommendations into the report to full council.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. In that case, I would commend the 6 recommendations in the report to Cabinet members, and we'll take them as approved unless anyone puts their hand up to dissent from that. Wonderful. Thank you very much, colleagues. That those recommendations are approved. So that takes us to the next item, which is the Treasury Management and Prudential Indicators report, the Capital Strategy and Investment Strategy, which I'll hand back to Councillor Nicholson for.
Councillor Zoe Nicholson, I know this is your favourite section of the agenda. It certainly is mine. And partly it's mine because this is an important role that local authorities can play in their local community, and also how we look after the money that effectively is the public's money really well. So I just the one thing that I wanted just to highlight to you all, I mean, obviously this is an annual investment strategy and an annual set of reports that we receive, and will go to full council in February. However, the big thing that I'm really pleased to be able to share with you is that we have gone quite a long way to try and revise the strategy so that it reflects our environmental and sustainability objectives as an administration. And we are attempting, within the limitations of the financial regulations, of which are a little constrained and somewhat tedious. The market definitely needs to catch up, I think, with the global desire to solve the climate crisis. But we have, I'll hand over to Ola in a minute to be able to, our Deputy CFO, to be able to talk you through some of the highlights of this. But the key thing for me is that we've been able to bring 2 things forward. One is a way in which we might be able to ensure that environmental, social and governance issues are addressed as part of the strategy, and then also creating a small green bonds part of our Treasury management function that we will test over the next few years to see whether or not we can use at least a proportion of our money in a way that supports sustainability. So I'd like to hand over to Ola, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Ola Wulabi, I'm the Deputy Chief Finance Officer. I mean, in line with the budget setting as well, every year we need to approve the Treasury management. And this is the document or the strategy that looks after our money, our surplus cash, our investment, our borrowing, and how we manage the risk as well. If we compare last year's strategy to this year's strategy, there are 3 main changes. One of them will affect our borrowing, and that is to do with PWLB borrowing. we tend to fund most of our capital program through PWLB borrowing. And what they are now doing is that they are now not going to allow any council to borrow mainly to yield an investment. However, they are still able to provide affordable loan to service spending activities, housing activities, regeneration programs, and treasury management. However, there might be projects which we cut across some of those factors, and is now left with the Chief Finance Officer to use our professional judgment in terms of determining whether it's an appropriate borrowing. Going back to the comment that Councillor Nicholson has already made reference to, the treasury management now include the council approach to ethical investment. This is in recognition of importance of supporting sustainability and ethical investment as part of future investment strategy. Therefore, consideration will be given to potential opportunity to invest in environmentally focused instruments, either locally or nationally. Again, I think what is important with that as well is that we need to ensure that we comply with CIFA investment guidance. Effectively, what CIFA is saying is that we need to make sure the security of the money, the liquidity, the yield, and then we look into ethical investment. This is an area that is currently being developed. I mean, we are one of the first council which is taking the leap in terms of doing something about this. The numbers of counterparties where we can invest, they are very, very limited. And what we are now doing now is that we're having discussion with our treasury management advisor, which is Link Services, to develop a credit worthiness checklist. If there is any opportunity, then we can use that in terms of arriving what we have to do. Therefore, within the strategy, we have created a non-specified investment, which might include Green Energy Board. And the minimum criteria for that is using both internal and external due diligence to assess it. A maximum investment of 2 million potentially has been identified. And the period will roughly be within 2 to 5 years. And again, this is an area that is still developing. I think we are working with other authorities to identify potential areas. I will stop there and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ola, and thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Before we go to Cabinet members for any questions or comments, first could I ask Councillor Berman to report back on any recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ola. The committee had no comments other than to support the recommendations in full. And we did also acknowledge the difficulty for the Treasury team in the current investment climate and that they're doing the very best they can, and we recognised it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. And I can see Councillor Peterson has his hand up. Councillor Peterson.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Councillor Peterson here. Yes, I too would like to acknowledge the way that our officers have put this forward and are keeping the council as well financed as they can in this aspect. I did read the Link report, which is very sobering, and I rather feel that the years ahead are going to be very difficult for everyone. But thank you to the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. So I'll open up to Cabinet members. Does anybody wish to ask any questions or make any points on this report? Councillor Collier, I think you were quickest on the draw there.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Ola for the work that he's put into this report and really taking on board the aspirations of the Alliance, the work that's within the report on ethical investment. And I'll just read one line. It says, historically, the Council has not included ethical criteria when determining its investment criteria. I think whilst it might not seem it, this is actually one of the most exciting things that we've got today, and I'd like to thank Ola for his work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. It is one of the most exciting things, and that's why there's thousands of people at home watching right now just for this item, I believe. Councillor Bird.
Yes, and thank you, Chair, Councillor Matthew Bird. And I'm one of those excited people actually watching. Echo Councillor Collier's comments there. It's a great piece of work, and just really groundbreaking. In terms of the thought and the depth with which we've looked at these issues. I mean, these are issues that quite a lot of councils shy away from, and the potential is enormous. I think we've seen just in the area of retrofitting our homes. It's a big issue, and it comes through the climate change strategy. I think nationally there's something like 29 million homes that need to be retrofitted, to get them up to the required standards. And in Lewes district, it's something like £30,000 per home. Now, there's opportunities to look at green bonds and to work with local energy companies. There's a real skills gap. There's all sorts of opportunities that, taking this approach, we can really sort of realise those as quickly as possible. And it's something that nationally isn't being done. The Green Homes Fund that's on offer, it hasn't had a big take up, and there's been lots of reasons for that. So we have a massive role to play in terms of ethical investment and future funding in our communities. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bird. And yes, I'd echo that. I think many moons ago at another cabinet meeting, I made the point about how what used to be the safe investments in extraction industries, particularly kind of big oil, never sell Shell, now seems to be not so safe, and indeed those companies are scrambling to invest in green energy to differing extents. And I think this is a great opportunity for us. We have money to invest. It's public money. We need to be safe with that money, but obviously also we have an opportunity to invest ethically with it to benefit, to sort of push forward the agenda that we're all committed to on this council. So, Arhan, do you have any further comments to add, Councillor Nicholson, while we wrap up before we move to vote on the recommendations?
No, thank you very much. I'm really pleased that the rest of Cabinet is so delighted with the approach here, and I think it's really helpful to be reminded that that is not what existed before in our previous strategies, and it's also really helpful to be reminded that how we look after the money and how money works in our economies is fundamental to addressing the climate crisis that we face. So not only should we definitely not be spending it on arms and other unethical, but we also need to be making sure that our money goes towards addressing the climate crisis. So this is at least a step in that direction.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, and thank you, Ola, for all your work on this, as everyone else has said. So in that case, I will take the four recommendations together. They're going to be referred to full council. So I'll take them as approved unless I see any hands dissenting from those approving those recommendations to go to council. Wonderful. Okay, that item is, those recommendations are approved. In that case, I'll move on to item 14. Councillor Nicholson, this is your last item on the agenda. I'm sure you'll be devastated to know. Can you introduce this one, which is on our annual review of fees and charges, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Zoe Nicholson. I am relieved this is the last item. Every year we do a little bit of a review of our fees and charges. There are some small changes, mostly to take into account the changes in the cost of delivery and also to take into account any market changes. And I simply recommend those to you. Cabinet members will know about them because you've all been part of creating, going through the business case of those individually anyway. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Berman, were there any recommendations on this report from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee?
Thank you, Chair. No, the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee supported the recommendations in full. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. I'll open it up to Cabinet members then. Does anybody wish to comment on anything in this report before we move to the recommendations? Okay, in that case, it's just to look at the two recommendations that are in there, which is recommendations 1 and 2, which I'll take as approved unless I see any hands dissenting from that. No, in that case, those recommendations are approved. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, in particular, for getting us through all those items. In that case, we will return to the main agenda, where we were before, where we'd just done item 16. We'll move on to skip forward to item 17, which is the Eastbourne and Lewes Community Safety Partnership Annual Report, and I will hand over to Councillor Denis to talk about this one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Johnny Denis. I'd like to give a bit of background to this paper, actually, because I'm not sure that it's widely understood what the Community Safety Partnership is. It comes about from the Community Safety, the Crime Disorder Act of 1998, which encouraged, it made a duty for local councils to cooperate with their partners in their area to reduce crime and disorder. The way that we do that here is we have a strategic board, which is across both councils of Lewes and Eastbourne, and then within each district or borough we have a joint action group, and they are groups of partners that work together to identify trends in crime and disorder, and these are statutory partners and community partners, and it's so it's an opportunity for intelligence to be passed, to be shared amongst partners. It's an opportunity for local communities to be updated on what's happening through policing, and we've set priorities, which are outlined in the report, and it tells you something about the areas that have happened over the last year and what we're looking at addressing further in the coming year. And there've been some things of note that may be interested to say that actually it would continue to be a low crime area. 57 crimes per 1,000 people reported. Even during a lockdown has changed some of the profile of how of the incidents that have happened, but it's still low. And I think the average for our benchmark group is 75 crimes per 1,000 people, so it's significantly lower than that. But instances of antisocial behaviour, and that's all classes of antisocial behaviour, have gone up a whopping amount. So we've got 2,562 reports this last year, which is a huge increase, up by 42%. It's almost doubled. We've got a number of priorities that the report addresses about the instance of antisocial behaviour, tackling the instance of antisocial behaviour, hate crime, domestic and sexual abuse, and it's reducing the number of people killed and seriously injured on districts' roads, as well as violence and knife crime. And within the road safety aspect, we're very keen on really emphasising the impact that antisocial driving has on our communities. It's reflected by every community across the JAG that's the issue that matters most. And although we tend to measure things about killed and seriously injured, because of course we're always trying to prevent that and reduce those numbers, most communities are impacted through the antisocial driving in other ways. And it's not just about road drivers, it's about the other road users and the communities through which those roads pass. And I just wanted to add that. I commend this report to you. It tells you what's been happening in the partnerships over the last year, and it's an indication of the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. Councillor Berman, were there any recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair. It's the PP. Sorry, excuse me. The PPAC did not have any anything but support for the recommendations. We were very impressed actually with what had come forward in it. There was one small mention of a change in the nature of crimes that are occurring. As Councillor Denis mentioned, there's been a lot more antisocial behaviour, but also there was quite an increase, we felt, that needed further investigation in online fraud and that type of thing. And I believe that's being followed up in due course. But other than that, we supported the recommendations in full. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Did any other Cabinet members wish to speak before I go back to Councillor Denis? Councillor O'Brien.
Councillor Emily O'Brien, I just wanted to say briefly how much I welcome the emphasis on road safety. As Councillor Denis said, it's just such an important issue. And I think it's one of those things that's really shifted during lockdown. I think in lockdown 1, we saw a big increase in people walking and cycling, but we also saw a drop in traffic. And I think that's not most people's experience in lockdown 3. And I know as someone with a rural ward, I've had people really concerned about the fact there's a lot more people out on the roads, but there's not the corresponding drop in traffic and the speeds of some of our roads as well. So really, really welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I can't see any other hands, so I'll go back to Councillor Denis.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Berman's mention of online fraud. It has certainly been picked up by the partnership and the Sussex Police, who are really very much active in this area, working hard to establish how to get through it and also to provide the right sort of education to consumers and potential victims of such fraud, because it is increasing. And in fact, I heard today in the JAG that I attended prior to this meeting. That's the Joint Action Group, is that because crime has changed profile during the various lockdowns, and criminality in the traditional way of robbery, for example, hasn't been taking place because people are more obvious in that role, and so actually there has been a migration towards online fraud and online theft. And that's certainly been picked up, and it's really, and it's being addressed at much bigger scale than in our partnership as well. So thank you for flagging that.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. The only recommendation is just to note this report. So it is so noted, and we will move on to item 18, which is the penultimate item on the agenda, voluntary sector support. So Councillor Denis, back to you to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnny Denis here again. I'm sorry you've heard a bit from me today, and I'm not talking about toilets, which is unusual. I really welcome this report because it tells us, it's got some key recommendations about how we take forward, how we support and fund our local voluntary community sector. We've got a tradition of doing so, but what we've done over the last number of years, that was introduced a couple of years back, is that we've funded a small group of organisations to deliver really, really important services. Now, there's been nothing wrong with those services. There's no criticism of those services because they're actually key and core and essential to supporting our communities. Now, what we're introducing here, what I'd like the Cabinet to support is introducing a way that what we're asking those organisations to do is clear in the first place, so that everybody knows what is expected and what is required, and then it opens it up not just to the fixed number of organisations that are already recipients of our grants, but opens up to other organisations that wish to contribute to the agenda. Now, we do think it should be open and transparent. And we want to make sure that we haven't missed opportunities of local community voluntary sector organisations to be able to deliver on our behalf with our community and supporting our community. So it's a recommendation that we also look at 3-year funding, a bit like what we've already done. So we want to make sure that they have that security of funding for the duration of the funding, and that's important to community voluntary sector organisations that are essentially fragile and looking for a bit more security in their funding. So this, I think, combines all of those aspects, with a process that is a little bit of an improvement in terms of transparency about how we go about doing that. And it's been suggested that we consider small grants as well. And while we could do that, and there's lots of other ways of carving up a funding pot and doing it differently. It's like any way that you want to cut up a cake. But we thought this was the most cost-effective way of doing it, because by introducing a smaller set of schemes where people can apply for smaller amounts, it means that it's an awful lot more work in terms of the limited capacity of our staff to deliver it. So actually, we're having the optimum of a more open and transparent system, security of funding, and the most time efficient for our staff. So I think that's probably the right balance. And so I'd like to recommend it to you, the recommendations to you. I hope you support it.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. Councillor Berman, could you give us recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee? And Councillors Linnington and Peterson, if you want to speak on this, please pop your hands up.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Roy Berman. Yes, at the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, this matter was discussed, and we were very pleased to continue helping the voluntary sector in our community, and glad to see that being done in an open and transparent way. There was a recommendation that we wanted to make, and that was that we would support all the recommendations as recorded, subject to the following amendment. Now, what it says in this printed amendment is not exactly what was intended in the meeting. It says that the recommendation 3 in the Cabinet report be amended to read, agreed to and award a combination of core grants without a bidding process alongside competitive grants on a triannual basis to be implemented in 21-22. And that's not exactly what we wanted. We wanted to suggest that both ways of tackling certain different applications could be combined, that there would be sort of a hybrid solution. But other than that, we would like to support all the recommendations of the as reported. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Linnington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Linnington. I think things have got a bit confused here. If I could just explain. Yes, the PPAC did support the recommendations, but there was one option that hadn't been considered during the consultation, which was to do everything triannually. That is the core provisions and some maybe smaller grants, and that wasn't one of the options. So really, it was actually my amendment that I put forward to PPAC, and it was that maybe that other option could be considered. So we weren't necessarily suggesting you replace the recommendation with the PPAC recommendation, but it was just that you should consider it before you come to a final decision. And I think from what Councillor Denis said, he had done that. But it was just that in the original consultation, there was a suggestion you could do core grants triannually and small grants annually, which I agree, I don't think that is the right thing to do. But the option of doing core grants triannually and some small grants triannually wasn't put forward. So I was just suggesting that maybe you want to consider that. And if you have and still come to the conclusion that you don't want to go down that road, then that's fine. But I just thought it was worth you considering that, because it meant you could do your core grants, but you could also do maybe some smaller ones as well, and those smaller ones wouldn't necessarily get done because they would all go to the core grants every 3 years. So that's all I was trying to do, and I just hope I've not confused you even more.
Thank you, Councillor Linnington. I think on the contrary, looking at people's faces, I think that that was an extremely helpful clarification on what was being asked there. Does anybody else want to speak on this item before I return to Councillor Denis? Nope. Okay, then back to you, Councillor Denis, to sum up and respond to the points made by Councillors Linnington.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. It's Councillor Johnny Denis here. Thank you, councillors, for your contributions. I was initially confused. I had considered this the options, and in fact, when we put out consultation, actually those are out for consultation. They're designed to stimulate discussion and debate and get contributions. And so we couldn't put out, there are probably an infinite number of possible configurations of running a grant scheme. So, and I had considered all sorts of cross options from multiple variants, including yours. And I have considered that. I still think that this is the most appropriate and best way and cash efficient way of supporting our extremely valuable local organisations that do so much for our residents, and in a secure way. And I do want to really value the work that they do for the people of Lewes district. And I still would like to recommend that we go with the transparent 3-yearly process that gives them security, that gives us openness, and addresses the needs of our community in Lewes district. So I hope that Cabinet will support me in that. Thank you very much, and thank you for your contributions, Deepak.
Thank you, Councillor Denny. I think that's an important point as well. If I say that, in terms of why the Policy and Performance Committee is there, is to say to us, have you considered this? Because things, can get missed. So thank you to all of you. I'd like to propose then that we take the recommendations unamended and propose those to Cabinet. I'll take them as approved unless I see any hands of dissension going up. Hands of dissension. There you go. No, I haven't got any of those. Okay, in that case, those recommendations are approved. Thank you, Councillor Denny, for all your work on that. And that moves us on to the last item on the agenda, which is item number 19, which is planning technical advice notes. Councillor O'Brien, I'll hand over to you for this one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Emily O'Brien. I should say I'm really excited to be here presenting these 3 pieces of guidance, which are designed to help developers and builders to increase the amount of sustainability in development, particularly new development. And it's particularly exciting to be bringing it today because we've already had our amazing climate action plan on the table. And in a sense, this is the other side of that. This is showing that as well as doing the most amazing plan, we also, we don't want that to be sitting on a shelf. We also mean business about making changes and how we do things. And I've just got 3 facts that I was going to share just to, I think, show why we have these bits of guidance. And I think they're all kind of quite mind-blowing, actually. So in our country, in the UK, houses, buildings, and the bits that go with them. So, for instance, when we put the kettle on, when we go into the house, or the heating, or plug in the TV, that the built environment, those buildings, actually contribute around 40% of our carbon footprint in the UK, which is a phenomenal amount. So if we're serious about climate change, we have to be serious about making our buildings more efficient in how they work. And then in biodiversity, in the last 50 years, we've lost over half, well over half, 56% of the UK's wild species. So that means that basically not only are the species out there that weren't there when I was born, but more than half the species out there are not there that were when I was born, giving you my age there. And then locally in East Sussex, I think the other really compelling fact in these 3 bits of guidance, and the thing that really, really astonished me when I heard about it, was the fact that of all the waste we produce in East Sussex, in our county, and you think about all the waste we put in our household recycling and all the restaurants and the commercial operations, more than half of that waste, 51%, comes from construction, comes from us making and renovating buildings. And that is a huge amount, isn't it? That's a waste mountain. That's not a small amount. So these bits of guidance are to directly address those facts, that problem. So one of them, one approach is around taking a circular economy approach to construction. So that's thinking about how we design buildings, how we reuse buildings, how we make sure they're designed so they can have a long life and then can be adapted in future, rather than knocked down in 20 years because they weren't something we could adapt going forward. And it's also about how we can design out waste in construction, particularly while we're doing the constructing. And that's a win-win because that can save builders and developers money, as well as dinting that enormous mountain of waste that we have. There's also some specific guidance to help developers with improving biodiversity. So the aspiration around that is in line with legislation to make sure that every single development in the district improves biodiversity rather than damages it. And then the last bit of guidance is around putting sustainability at the heart of at the beginning of our planning process. So we have a new checklist that means we're having that conversation with builders and developers really early on and helping them to make the best decisions around how they incorporate that. And I think the important thing to say about that and about all of this guidance is it's not a stick. This isn't about us inventing something and then beating developers and builders over the head with it. Developers are telling us really loud and clear they want to do the right thing here, but they do need help with getting there. They need to be us to be clear about what we expect, and we need to give them the help to do that. And we very much work with builders and developers around developing them in order to ensure that we're working with those community partners, because as we pointed out when we talked about the strategy earlier, you know, we can't do, this isn't up to us to do as a council. This is about working with our communities and our community partners and our business partners to do it right. So I'm happy to take questions on it, but just to summarise, I'm really, really proud to be presenting these 3 pieces of guidance. And I'd like to thank our officers who've worked really, really hard on them. And I'd like to urge our Cabinet to approve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Berman, your last chance today. And any recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee? And just to add, Councillors Linnington and Peterson, if you want to add anything on this item, please put your hands up. Councillor Berman.
Thanks again, Chair. Roy Berman. The Policy and Performance Advisory Committee supported the recommendations in full, and actually we're very pleased to see the progress being made in this direction. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Peterson.
Yes, Councillor Peterson. Yes, I think this is a very good way forward, and I think it's really important, especially in reducing our carbon footprint and the amount of waste which is created in the building trade. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Okay, so I'll open up to Cabinet members now. Would anybody like to ask any questions or has any thoughts on this? Councillor Bird, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Bird. Yes, I just want to say what a fantastic piece of work this is. You know, it's really, really in depth, and I think, you know, as Councillor O'Brien says, you know, it gives that sort of framing for the conversation. You know, a really important tool for developers. You know, they do want to do the right thing, and you know, I've worked with a lot of developers on sustainability issues in the past, and I think you know, guidance like this would have been really, really very useful. So yeah, no, it's really good. I mean, I do have a sort of question. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, there are many businesses that are struggling, you know, at the moment in the current climate. So I just want to ask, you know, have we made sure that our small and local businesses, they're not going to be adversely affected by this approach?
Councillor O'Brien, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were coming to me at the end, but I'm happy to respond now. Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor O'Brien. I was going to say, I really, really welcome that question. Thank you. In terms, I think what's really important to say in terms of how we've got here, our officers have worked really closely. Well, they've worked with a number of people. So firstly, they've worked really closely with wildlife groups in order to ensure that things like the biodiversity net gain stuff, the stuff about ensuring habitats is absolutely spot on. But the other group they work with really, really closely is builders and developers. And actually, that's one of the things that has changed. We were really, really keen to make sure that we didn't end up with some guidance that was doable for the big players, the big boys, but left out us, and girls, I should say, but left out our small and local businesses that are so important to our local economy and are so important in our community wealth building agenda about making sure we have thriving local businesses. So there's a 2-tier approach built into the way the guidance works. So the requirements are larger for bigger developments than they are for smaller developments. And I think the other thing to stress is also we're not, you know, this isn't always going to be appropriate, although it might be a useful tool for some individual householders. It's not a tool, it's not geared at those. So if you've got a house and you're sticking on an extension, you don't have to jump through loads of hoops. That's not what this is about. It's about the larger developments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Carr is next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I absolutely welcome this guidance. I think it's much needed and very welcome to give everyone a clear framework as to where we are. I'd also like to ask a question, if I may. I understand that the government will be passing legislation on some of these areas, including biodiversity net gain. Can you tell me how our guidance will fit in with that?
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I've only got one other hand, Councillor O'Brien, so I'll come back to you after Councillor Collier. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to welcome this really important paper. I think something we should recognise across the whole meeting is that when you're delivering an ambitious corporate plan like we're delivering, it's done with papers like this, pieces at a time. We've had Matthew's paper, we've had the Treasury, management, and now this. All of these pieces are the pieces that help us deliver the corporate plan. I think it's really important that we recognise how many of those things have come together today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. And I think it should be an action for the planning industry as a whole to come up with more glamorous names for what they do, because these things often really understate how important they actually are to the overall objectives, but also to contributing to wider things, like you say, about science, sustainability, climate change, and other areas. Councillor O'Brien, if you would sum up for us.
Yes, of course. If I could just come back to Councillor Carr's point, I think the problem, I take your point completely, that actually we're waiting for the Government's Environment Act to clarify the situation around things like biodiversity net gain. However, I think, as you're really aware, we have been waiting for that legislation for years, and it's just been postponed again. And we're in a climate emergency right now, and we only have a few years to act, basically. So I think, you know, if we were to jump into the future, our children's future, when we look back, we'd be saying, actually, you know, if we haven't acted on climate change by then, it will make our current pandemic look like a teddy bear's picnic, quite frankly. So I suppose what I'm saying is that we're aware. What I would say to you as Cabinet members is it's quite likely that we will need to bring some of this guidance back to Cabinet in order to adapt it if there's a new legislative framework, if the Environment Act says something slightly different, or if other things have changed. But in the meantime, you know, we're not willing to wait on the government, particularly not after the numerous postponements to that legislation. We're not willing to wait on that. I think, just while I'm talking about that, I'm really frustrated, I have to say, by the continued postponement of this such important legislation. And I note that the government just this week have announced their new other changes to the planning system around design codes and embedding beauty into the design system. And I have to say that fills me with frustration. I would like to, every time they say the word beauty, I would like to see sustainability in there. And I talked to someone about it earlier, and I said, if we don't put sustainability in there, frankly, putting beauty in deciding what colour cladding goes on a house, it's putting lipstick on a pig. You don't means nothing. So the short answer to Julie's point is yes, we might need to adapt, but we're really happy to bring that back to Cabinet when government is caught up. But in the meantime, we're happy to be on the front foot. And otherwise, I think I've said all I had to say, really, just to say, you know, thank you for those really important points. And again, thanks to our officers for all the hard work they've put in. And I just commend these papers to you, these bits of guidance to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, and I share your frustration. I think a lot of people find it astonishing that the government keeps claiming it doesn't have time for important things when they manage to ram an entire trade bill with the European Union through Parliament in a day. But you know, apparently different things take different lengths of time. So I just commend this one to you all. I think there are 4 recommendations in there. Unless I see any hands of dissension, I'll assume that's approved. Yep, no hands. In that case, those 4 recommendations are approved. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions today. That concludes the items of business, and I close this meeting at 4:40 p.m. Thanks a lot, everybody.